Don't be ashamed to learn things that you need to know. Here's Sexplanations with Dr. Doe.
Sexplanations podcast, episode 5. We're going to talk about urinary tract infections and all the tangential sex things that come from unscripted conversations with yours truly, Lindsay Doe. I'm a doctor of human sexuality and clinical sexologist. Today, that means that my like-minded friends usually have sexual curious brains like myself. Fact, when I was in middle school, one of my friends and I would take turns telling each other stories about our crushes. In other words, we would make up fantasies to turn each other on. Puberty. My current curiosity, how often do my friends talk with each other about sex? And today's guest, Richelle, is a friend of mine. How often do you talk with your other friends about sex?
My friends other than you.
Yes.
Okay, so if it's not you, it's pretty close to every time I talk to them. But if it's you, it's just about every time I talk to you.
So the same.
Yeah.
And
How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I am the constant. I talk to everyone about sex.
All the time.
When they want to.
I'm trying to think of instances where I've seen you avoid talking about sex with anyone, and I can't think of any.
And I was trying to think of instances where I do talk about sex with others. I don't know. It's I don't think I think about it enough to have records.
I mean, in fairness, we just went to lunch someplace. You ran into like a grad school friend.
Oh, yeah.
And instantly you said what you did, and somebody was like, oh, yeah, I help with anorgasmia by doing this thing, and like started, listing off like proper physiology, and just went straight to talking about vulvas, which I feel like is a pretty common experience I have with you.
So, but it's not just me. You're not just having sexual conversations with me. You're having sexual conversations with other people. And maybe that's why we're friends.
That's probably a big reason. Yeah.
There are lots of reasons. So Richelle and I have known each other for 8 years.
Something like that.
Something like that. You took my human sexuality class.
True.
You were an awesome gauge for me in the audience because you were very attentive as a student, and so I could watch your face, and if you gave me this funny look, then I knew I wasn't being clear and I could change how I phrase things. And if you were smiling and laughing, I was like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and I just had a huge crush on you. So I think it was just a look of like, Yeah.
Oh, no.
Why, oh, no. Oh, yes.
Unrequited love?
No, it just changed and is now friendship.
Oh, okay.
I still have a squish on you.
Yeah, I have a squish on you. That's good. It's reciprocity.
Yeah.
All right. Any other things that we need to say to introduce you to the audience?
Nope. Let's dive in.
Okay, here we go. Before we talk about urinary tract infections or UTIs, I want to first give a shout out to the Sexplanats who fund Sexplanations podcast on patreon.com/Sexplanations podcast. I was really nervous about doing a podcast, the logistics of it, like where we'd record and when, the extra resources it takes, and it means so much to me that there are already more than 24 of you helping out with the show, like the show bosses, Laura Schuster, Donna Flint, and the Millers. Each week on Sexplanations podcast, we do a multiple choice question in their honor.
Dr. Doe is holding testes. She's holding testes.
Urinary tract infections, or UTIs, are responsible for nearly 10 million doctor visits each year. 20% of biosex females will have one at some point in their lives, so that's 1 out of 5.
Only 20%?
Yeah.
That's
1 out of
surprising.
5. I mean,
I thought it was like 80.
oh, no.
Because I think my experience, I'm like, that must be the dominant experience, because it's mine.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
Eratocentricity. Okay, so then for biosex males, the records, they only say rare. So there isn't even a number that's given in the research that I did. Not the research that I did, but the research that I read. So my question is, what causes 80 to 90% of the UTIs that 1/5 of biosex females get and a rare number of biosex males get? What causes 80 to 90% of them? A, Escherichia coli, or E. coli, the bacteria you are probably aware of that's in feces. B, urinary catheters, which are tubes put into the urethra so you can urinate without using the restroom.
No.
C, dehydration, not having enough fluids. Or D, changes in hormones during the menstrual cycle.
A, it's the poo.
Yay! It's Escherichia coli. Nice. Was that fun?
That was so much fun.
Thanks, Sexplanots. Okay, so do you want to talk about your urinary tract infections? I could talk about mine as well.
Yeah, but first, can I say Sexplanations is the coolest name for a membership, like, community of all time.
Oh, thanks.
I love that.
The ones who don't fund our programs are called Sexplaneteers. And if you fund, then you're a Sexplanaut.
Oh, man, they're the coolest.
Yeah, they are.
Go, you guys.
Thanks.
I love them.
I love them too. They're wonderful. So I invited you on here because we have talked about urinary tract infections before, your experiences with them, my experiences with them. And then 4 years ago on Sexplanations YouTube channel, we did an episode about your UTIs where I talk about the anatomy and physiology of what's going on. I would love to know your experiences though, and then we can answer some questions from the audience.
Okay. I'm trying to think about where to start with my...
Do you remember
UTI
your first
experience.
UTI?
Oh, man, I wish I could forget my first UTI.
I wish there was only one and I didn't have to say first. Right?
Yeah, I had some learning to do about UTIs. So I'm trying to remember the order that it was in, but I think the first time I had a UTI, I didn't really know what was going on, but I remember waking up at like 3 a.m. And just violent vomiting, like cold sweats. Thought I had the flu or something. Mm-hmm. Didn't really know what was going on, but I had to pee constantly. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I would pee and it would be like, it'd be like
A drop.
It'd be like peeing eye drops, like one drop at a time. Like nothing was coming out, but it felt like my bladder was full. And I was pretty young. I'm making up an age here because I don't remember. I want to say like 17 or 18, maybe 18, 19, something like that.
You were sexually active then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what was going on. I also have like pretty severe health anxiety. So I assumed it was, you know, cancer or something. I didn't know what it was, but I went to the most extreme. And I'm sure I WebMD'd it, which I almost never recommend doing. Because, the answer is always cancer, right? Like, you're like, I have a cough today. And they're like, you definitely have cancer. But I think I ended up going in, you know, they really quickly figured out what it was. And so I think that time it resolved pretty quickly.
Because they gave you an antibiotic.
An antibiotic. I think this is how it went down. And then I think the next time, though, I didn't connect the peeing frequency or the body sensations to a urinary tract infection. Like it took me repeated times to learn what that sensation felt like and what was it, a UTI. So I think the next time, or maybe I have it in reverse order. Either way, something similar happens where, except I don't have vomiting, I don't have fever, I'm like peeing every 20 minutes or every hour, and it's like I'm not peeing anything.
You're dripping every 20 minutes.
I'm dripping, yeah. It's like I'm eye dropping every 20 minutes. But it feels like my bladder's full. It's very hard to pee. And I thought maybe I was just dehydrated. And the way that I was coping with emotional and physical stress at that point was to lean into it and go harder. So I decided, you know what would really be like cleansing for my body is to go on this like 2-hour-long hike up a mountain without a water bottle. And so I remember going on this hike thinking like, oh, I'll sweat it out. I don't know. There's like this is like the equivalent of bloodletting, right? Like there's no science base to this. It was just like, oh, this seems like a good idea. And so I remember having these peeing symptoms and I was like, I'm going to go for a hike. I'll sweat out this whatever's going on. I think that was one of the least intelligent decisions I've ever made in my life. And so I go on this hike and slowly I'm feeling like this backache, this like kind of weird cramp in my back. And I lift weights. So I was like, oh, maybe I did some weird deadlift wrong, or maybe it was something from lifting weights. And I keep not connecting all of the symptoms. And basically what happened is I had a UTI, but it escalated from a UTI into a kidney infection within like 24 hours because I was dehydrated. And it just sucked straight up from my urethra into my kidneys. So I get done with this hike, I go to the bathroom, and my eyedropper of pee now has a few drops of blood in it. And I remember being like, that's pretty strange, but you know, maybe Maybe it's like maybe, you know, I've had strange things happen before. Like you have sex and maybe there's a few drops of blood. It wasn't a lot of blood. Like maybe I was spotting, you know, like I really don't know.
Right.
So I continue to not go to the doctor, not do anything about it. And then that second night, I got the vomiting and chills and then like couldn't move. Like the pain in
Yeah, I
my
was gonna say.
kidneys became just ferocious. And so then I ended up going to the doctor and they had to see how far it had progressed before I got medical care. And in order to do that, they had to fill my body with, this is where I'm going to go super non-scientific
That's
because I
okay.
really don't know what I'm talking about. But I had to have a CT scan and they wanted to see from the top down and from the bottom up where the infection began and ended.
Gotcha.
So I had to both drink this liquid. I'm so sorry to the medical community for not knowing what this is called or what I'm talking about, but I had to drink this liquid that shows up on the imaging. Yep. And then at the same time, they also had to give me an enema of this liquid. So that was interesting. And I still don't totally understand how the two are connected, but
Me neither.
that's what they had to do. But the most memorable part of that for me was that, you know, we live in a small town. My family's been here for a long time. And so basically you drink this liquid, you lay on the table, they give me an enema of this other liquid, and I'm sitting with my butt up and exposed on the table with like a tube of this liquid going into my butt. And the doctor with the clipboard comes in and he goes, "Oh, I know your family. I used to like read from them. How's your dad doing?" And he's like having this conversation with me while I'm like, my kidneys are on fire and I can't move and I'm getting an enema. And we do the CT scan and then he's like, "Okay, you're all done." And I'm like, what do I do next? Like my body is full of liquid. Like, how do you stand? Like, what do you do? And so I just kind of looked at him with, I'm sure, panic. And he's like, "Yep, just make your way to the restroom," which is like 40 feet away. And so I had to like duck walk into the bathroom and he's like, "Say hi to your dad for me." And that was probably the most memorable part of that. But it took, I ended up having a very long stint of antibiotics. And it took months for it to fully resolve. And since then, I have changed a ton of habits around UTIs, and I had one other UTI after that kind of experience. And it was like 20 minutes. I had the first eyedropper pee and I was like, "Doctor, sign me up." And it was like a 40-minute experience before I got on antibiotics. Like I was like in there. I was not going to have that happen again. So, yeah.
rough.
So if you pee blood, maybe get that checked out.
Definitely get that checked
or if your
out.
kidneys hurt, like, there's a different, now I also know how to check if it's like my back muscles versus my kidneys, because when they test you for kidney infection, they give your kidneys a little knock, like a knock on wood. And now I know what the sensation is of like, oh shit, this is my kidneys. It's not like my back is sore from deadlifting. Very different feeling, but I didn't know it at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm taking away from your story is that going to a medical provider doesn't necessarily need to be because you're resolving some sort of issue or you have created a pain in your body that has to be removed via a professional. It could be that you're going there to learn something. That the doctor is teaching you prevention for the future. My very first UTI that I can remember, at least, I was probably also in high school, probably also sexually active. I was visiting my uncle in Chicago with my dad and brother, and I remember us all being in this living room, and I would just be going to the bathroom every 5 minutes and doing the same dripping thing and just feeling like, why is it? I don't understand. And to me, I think if I were to describe past Lindsay's experiences with that, it's almost like being aroused and not knowing how to get that sensation to go away. And so I would go in and I would pee and nothing would come out, but I would have, that burning.
Yeah, it's like a urethra almost like tingling almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am not sure how that one resolved. My guess is that my dad probably just was like, what's going on? And sent me to the gynecologist. Because I did go to the gynecologist when I was 15, I think. He dropped me off. And from there, I think the next big one was maybe around 19. And I went to a walk-in clinic. And this was one of the most profound moments in terms of my sexology interest and, being in a medical office, is that at that time, my roommate was really into naturopathy. Her whole family was. And I, was living in hippie Missoula from Midwest Ohio. And I was like trying to eat meals without napkins and learn more about how to do body talk and
Wait,
whatnot.
what about a napkin?
I
Like,
was
what?
all into the environment. And
Oh, okay. I was
we're
like,
not gonna
how does
use napkins?
How does naturopathy connect to napkins?
We're gonna body talk, and we're gonna, heal ourselves through these natural means. Okay, so that's who I was at the time, and I went into this office probably at 19, and the provider says, "You have a UTI." And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to take care of it with cranberry juice.
Oh,
right?
God.
And he looked at me and in so much sincerity explained that, okay, you can do that. You right? You have control over your body, but I will see you back in here tomorrow and you won't be walking into my office. You'll be crawling. And so instead of just taking that and feeling defeated, I pushed on him to say, is there a third option? If I don't want to take an antibiotic because the outcome of that is typically a yeast infection that I then have to take something else for, what can I do? And he just launched into very open communication about sex and explained, I could take the antibiotics this time, but then a lot of my power comes around prevention. And he said, the reason why UTIs are often called the honeymoon disease is because during sex, body fluids will move around. And if you have E. coli from the anus go anywhere near the vagina, then it can often get into the urethral opening or the meatus or meatus, and that's how you get the urinary tract infection. And to have a doctor be so forthcoming with sex and so intuitive to know that that was absolutely the cause of what was going on, felt, that was when I fell in love with the medical field and started to trust them in terms of the sexual knowledge that they could impart if they do it.
I definitely tried the cranberry thing myself also.
And?
I think it prolonged my getting medical attention. So I think for my experience, and other people might have a different one than me, but I think the placebo effect of doing something prevented me from getting medical care later on. So.
Yeah, I understand. And people write to me and they say that typically cranberry capsules, because then you don't have all the sugar of the beverage that tries to balance out how tart cranberries are. But my response to that is like, oh, you are not having a UTI like I'm having a UTI, because when I have a UTI, it's game on. Like as soon as that very first sensation to pee happens and a good urinary stream doesn't come out, then I am to the doctor, whatever the cost, whatever time of day, because I don't mess around with that stuff.
And I think that's definitely also like a privilege, right? Like,
yes.
I think the first, I don't know, I'm sure I've had more than 3 at this point, but my first few times I'm like in college and I didn't have, proper medical care and I wanted to solve it on my own. So there's a combination of factors. And I think people I've heard from that use the cranberry technique or want to explore that is because they don't have the privilege of proper access to medical care. So I don't think it's out of that they don't want the medical care, right? Like sometimes it's just that they don't have the access to it. So
yeah,
I don't know what to say about that other than I wish everybody did, you know, but it's definitely like at this point for me, it is a privilege that whenever I have eye drop or pee, I'm like, okay, going to a doctor, like not messing around with the cranberry stuff. Like I'm just going in.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is an element of access and privilege to that. But even in college, when I didn't have the resources, when that second or third or fifth one came on. No, I don't think I've gotten that high. But the when I recognized what was happening and I knew what I did, it didn't matter whether or not I could afford it. I had to, because I had experienced a conversation with the helping professional that reassured me this is the way that it could be done so that I didn't feel worse.
Yeah. And part of the reason I go into a medical provider now is because, oh my God, it is so much more expensive for it to turn into a kidney infection.
Right.
Because then you're in it for the CT scan, and I was on IVs and all this other crazy stuff, which, got so much more expensive. And I think that, for the walk-in clinic to get, I was like, I have a UTI. If you want to do a urinary sample, you can, but I need this type of medication in this amount because this is, I'm like, I know what I need. I will pee in a cup and be out of here in 20 minutes. And the walk-in clinic charge is $150 or something. And then the cost of the prescription, and that couple $100, while not insurmountable, it was significant for me at the time, but much less significant than doing a CT scan and having a kidney infection. So,
Okay, so let's do one more sponsorship plug here, and then we'll talk about prevention. This little segment is called the main squeeze.
Main squeeze, squeeze it good.
Because we're squeezing our PC muscles, or our pubococcygeus muscles, by doing Kegels. Every time you make a silly noise, so you have free reign over this sponsorship ad. You just make a silly noise whenever you feel like it.
I'm distracted by doing Kegels now.
You're just
I'm
doing
already
them right
doing
now.
them. It's already happening. Once you say it, it's like whoever's listening is already doing them too. It's already happening. But okay, keep
Then
going.
you'll be stronger than the rest of us. So every time you make a silly noise during this plug from our sponsor, we are going to start and stop urination, which is, we're not going to start and stop urination, but we're going to start,
pee
we're
on
going
your
to clench the muscles that start and stop urination, called a Kegel.
Okay.
Does that work? Do you have
Kegel,
some-
Kegel. Kegel, Kegel.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Can you make the funny noises?
I can if you want to read the post.
Yep, let's trade.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. AdamandEve.com is an online superstore for adult shoppers to buy dildos, condoms, lube,
Beep.
sex swings. It's very hard to read. Kegel. and not laugh at your jokes. Okay. Pocket pussies and lingerie. Their products are described in detail at AdamandEve.com.
Beep, beep.
Make sure that they're 100% silicone
Ooh.
or
You can't.
or another high quality material. Learn how to clean them,
Here.
not the condoms, of course, though, and have them shipped discreetly using promo code SEXPOD. That's SEXPOD. When you check out online, it gets you 50% off on an eligible item, plus free shipping anywhere in the US or Canada.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
awesome.
that was good.
Did you do any Kegels on my notes? Are you so
There was
distracted?
I think there was a 5-second pause. I was just trying to read and kegel.
Read and Kegel and hear the sound. Yeah, it took a lot of concentration for me too. I don't know that I got any Kegels in, so I'll just do them for the rest of our
Okay, I'm
chat.
going to wink at you, and whenever I wink, you have to kegel.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Gotcha. This is kind of fun because it's like you're controlling my vagina. All right, here we go. Comment section of the Sexplanations video on UTIs. Here we have Noxyjinx malphiceum. I've heard from a specialist that some people are more prone to UTIs due to blood type and body structure. Is this true?
You're looking at me like I should know the answer to that.
No. I
I have no idea. I mean, I think it was just like a wild ass guess is like if your perineum is closer to your vulva, that could somehow contribute to having more UTIs.
yeah. If your
Or, I mean, your anus is closer to your
closer
vulva.
to your urethral opening.
Sure.
So
Or
if you
vulva,
have if you have an anus, then a perineum, then a huge ball sack, then the length of a penis, then the urethral opening, there is a body structure there that makes more of a distance between the E. coli getting to the urethral opening. Whereas in a biosex female body, especially a tiny one, it would go anus, about an inch of perineum, then the vulva with the vaginal opening, and right above that would be the urethral opening. So much less space.
Yeah, it's like the difference between E. coli. It's like running a marathon for biosex male anatomy versus like running around the block. It's just,
Okay, yeah.
no, yeah, or something. It's just a lot shorter. It's just so
Well-
much closer. And imagine if you have a very tiny perineum, right? And it's like you just walk out the front door.
Well,
and you're there.
what I think changes it from a 5K to a run around the block is if you have an object of insertion like a penis, a finger, a toy, etc., that's taking the E. coli from the anus up to the meatus.
That's like taking an elevator.
Exactly.
That's not even a 5K.
Well,
It's the escalator.
yeah. The 5K
The analogy
would be
is falling apart.
just the wiping. But if something is moving it to the meatus, then it's there.
I don't
So
know about blood type.
I'm going to look it up real quick here.
Okay.
What are we? UTI blood type. Here we go. This is from a study. I'm finding it at the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health. And it says ABO blood group, secretor state, and the susceptibility to recurrent urinary tract infection in women. And it looks like they're calling it synergy. So women of blood groups B and AB who are non-secretors of blood group substances showed a significant relative risk of recurrent urinary tract infection compared with other types. Do you know what your blood type is?
O positive.
Mine too. So neither of us are B or A. AB.
We have the same
But it
blood
looks
type?
like there's a correlation. We do.
That's crazy.
We could share someday. We need to.
There you go.
All right. So, did we answer the question? Blood type, body structure? Yes. Blood type and body type can increase a person's susceptibility. Lots of bots, right? It seems from your description that men don't get UTIs because of the distance the bacteria needs to travel. What about homosexual men? Could unprotected gay sex, as ill-advised as it is for so many reasons, lead to a male UTI, or do those simply not exist?
Oh, what a brilliant question.
Do you want to know? Do you have an answer? Do you want to know my answer?
I'm just saying it's a great question.
It is a great question.
Yeah, I want to know your answer.
I'm like, I wonder if I've answered it before in a video. So what I imagine the person is asking is if they take their penis that has the meatus right at the tip and they put it into an anus that's full of E. coli.
That distance is so short.
Right.
Non-existent. They're like, that's
It's
there.
in. It's right
That's
there.
happening.
Yes. Okay. But the difference between that and the meatus of a biosex female is that typically during sex, a biosex male will ejaculate and push that
Oh.
E. coli out. The same way that it's advised everyone pee after sex because you flush it out. They're more likely to automatically be doing that.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Also, the length of the urethra in the penis is a much further distance to travel to get into more internal organs than it is for a biosex female.
Yeah.
So
brilliant.
you could ejaculate, then you could pee again before it's really traveling all the way up versus a biosex female where it's right there.
It's like a ticking time bomb. You got to pee real fast.
Yeah, pee, everybody. Pee before and after sex. That's what the doctor says. Okay, Tenley Nadine. Is there really no other way to get rid of a UTI besides antibiotics?
I feel like we covered this,
Yeah.
which is like, I'm sure
Yeah,
I'm
no.
sure there are other ways to do it. Just my experience is like, I'd prefer not to risk it.
Me neither. I would say that if you are looking at cranberry as an option, one, call a medical provider and just have a conversation on the phone with them about your efforts to do so. And then go for cranberries or cranberry capsules versus the juice because the juice is so
Sugary.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is, feeding infections. Anything else you want to suggest?
Drink a lot of water
Yeah.
either way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Water,
if you're on
water,
antibiotics or
flush
not,
that.
that is a non-medical opinion, but I'm sure doctors would back me up on it.
Oh, yeah, totally, because you want to flush it out. Wolfgang Kenshin, does this mean a woman can pee without removing her tampon if she's having her period?
You're looking at me with such a smug smile, like, do you want to explain the anatomy or do you want me to?
I put this question in here because I think it's a valuable reminder that a lot of people believe they pee out of their vaginas, or the bisex females pee out of their vaginas.
Which makes sense, right? Like,
Right.
we're in a culture that does not encourage us to look at our vaginas all the time. So no shame if you think you pee out of your vagina. It's just not correct.
Right. There are two different holes. One,
I'm like, you explain this all the time. Like, I'm trying to find the language and, the visuals, and you've got this. This is what you do all day, so do your thing.
yeah, two different holes. One is the vaginal opening where tampons can go to stop menstrual fluid from leaving the body. And the other is the meatus, or the urethral opening that goes to the urethra. So you can absolutely urinate with the tampon in. Is that what the person is asking? Yes. Does this mean a woman can pee without removing her tampon? Yay!
Yeah, I think what's confusing when I heard about these multiple holes happening in my body was I was imagining them all being the same size. I was like, oh God, I'm missing this like whole extra hole. So in my head, if I could put some like visual descriptors, right? Like meatus, and urethra is like size of a straw, maybe
Yeah. Even littler, probably.
maybe smaller.
Yeah.
And then vaginal canal is expandable, but at let's say at resting state, if you're just peeing and deciding to explore your vulva, typically bigger than a straw, like
Like a nickel.
sure, and expandable.
Yeah.
But that's typically where if you were inserting something into your vulva, that's where you are inserting things into. So if you can't find two holes that are the size of a nickel, it's because, that urethra
is
and
smaller than the
meatus, one is much smaller.
And there are other holes, too, that you might find to the right and left side of the meatus are the openings to the Bartholin's gland. And above the meatus is something that might look like a hole, but it's not. It's a clitoris.
Is that a new name for skeins?
Yeah. Well, Skene's gland. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The
Anyways,
clitoris is
I
not.
feel like we could talk about like anatomy all day, and I know you've covered it a million times. Watch the videos.
Watch the videos.
There you go.
Okay. Sextra credit.
Now you can practice at home. Dr. Doe gives you extra credit.
So every episode of Sexplanations podcast, we give a homework assignment for people to do on their own throughout the week. And then we can all be having learning experiences outside of this 145-minute session. Commit to a new hygienic behavior every day for this next week. And here are some examples. Maybe you want to add some, Richelle. Wiping front to back, cleaning your asshole, just outside, with soap and water, then cleaning the hand you used with soap and water. Peeing before and after sex and masturbation, which we've talked about, drinking enough water. And then make sure to write all this down in your SexPod journal. Take photos of your homework and post them on Twitter. Tag Sexplanations, because I'd love to see what you're accomplishing. Anything that you want to add to that list?
Are we going to talk about prevention?
Yeah.
Okay, because this is probably the one that has impacted my sex life the most. And it's a hygienic thing, which is just I am so strict now about anything coming near my vulva has to be cleaned with soap and water. So toys,
Fingers.
especially fingers, penises, whatever. I said that plural, like
All the penis.
like there's multiple. There's not, but
What do you do about mouths?
that's a great question. I just let mouths be mouths, even though I am educated enough to know that there's still a risk with that. I haven't had any personal problems with it, and based on my current monogamous partnership and all the risk factors involved, I just let a mouth be a mouth. But I still pee after any type of play. So, but my hygiene that I would add is like, if anything is coming near genitals, make sure they're washed.
Okay, so clean toys, clean hands, clean penises, not clean mouths, but still peeing before and after sex, or at least after sex.
At least after, yeah.
Wiping front to back. I make sure to change my underwear more frequently than I might shower. If I'm showering like every 2 days, if I'm like out in the woods or just not having a shower, I am still changing underwear.
Type of underwear too.
Yeah.
This is something you got me on because
Really?
so the first time around that I had a UTI, you were like, you might want to consider like getting, plain white cotton underwear. And I was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to look dumpy, like wearing these like white cotton granny panties. And I think you even bought me a pair of like Hanes granny panties. And I was like, oh, not doing this. But I was like, I need to look for something that maybe a little more stylish that would allow my vulva to breathe more. So what I think another habit I had is I would work out and I'd get really sweaty. Let's just use the word swampy because that feels like the best word to describe it. And I would typically wear, workout pants, but I wasn't wearing underwear because they're uncomfortable to, do squats in. And then I'd go like run errands.
Oh, yeah.
And, I feel like that would just allows for a lot of mixing of things that I don't think I want. So now, I take a shower right after I go to the gym. And I also change underwear. And I also wear typically cotton underwear if I'm doing any type of physical activity. And all of those things have been really helpful.
Or at least underwear that have, how there's 2 layers of fabric on the part that goes up against your vulva? Having the layer that's closest to your body be white. So you could get all different sorts of colors
cotton.
and fabrics, but if you can get that one lining piece to be white cotton. That's ideal. And like skinny jeans, they're super fashionable, but like let shit breathe.
Yep.
Yeah. That what else? I am really careful about the sex positions that I get into. So if there's a lot of fluid on my end, like my vagina is producing fluid or I'm adding lubricant to it, I want to make sure that my meatus is higher up than my anus so that just gravitation isn't moving fluid the other way. So for example, if there's a lot of fluid, I'm not going to do a position where I'm on my stomach where the fluid would go.
Like doggy style or something where you're having, Yeah.
And another thing that I noticed is, so I have sex with a person who has a penis, and if we are face to face, so either he's on top or I'm on top, his ball sack is flapping up against my anus, which means the front of his ball sack has all sorts of E. coli on it unless I've washed really well. So if I then turn around and I get on my knees in a doggy style position, then I am very cautious about his ball sack then coming up and flapping up against my meatus.
It's like a mud flap.
Yeah.
That's all I'm imagining right now.
I don't know if I'm picturing my anatomy correctly, but in terms of positions, I'm very cautious about what parts of his body have gotten up against my anus, and then I don't want to like go and rub on those. So I will either wear underwear at the same time so that he can just go around that center piece and the rest of my anatomy is protected, or I will do positions. I'll change the order of the positions so that I'm not putting my meatus anywhere near a coli that's on his body.
Yeah, I will also say that if anything I'm playing with touches my anus, it is like, shut the show down. It's got to be washed before we can resume play. And I will say that that is not particularly sexy, but I haven't had a UTI in like
Right?
a long time.
Right.
So I think that one's more challenging for my partners than it is for me. Because I'm like, whoa. Something touched my butt. What was it? How do I keep it away from the rest of my anatomy until it's cleaned or, And sometimes if it can be, rodeo style, right? Like if it's a pinky, it can be hands up the rest of the time or something, right? If we don't want to stop the show.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's like that can't touch we have to adjust our position or whatever we're doing so that no longer comes in contact with my vulva.
That happened to me last night, actually.
The
And
rodeo?
my partner just knew like that his penis had hit my anus, and I didn't have to say anything. He just made his way to the bathroom
And then came back.
and then came back.
Oh, that's so nice.
It is nice, but the cost of having a UTI is really high. And, because I choose to use antibiotics to get rid of it, there is likely a yeast infection that follows it. And then resolving that is another cost. And it's painful. And so if I can mitigate that, I will be here when you get back, and I'll probably be more wet because I'm so excited that you respected my body
Oh,
and you care about my
yeah.
health.
So hot.
Yeah.
One of my partners, after I got a UTI, apologized.
Aw,
And it was like the sweetest thing ever.
they were aware.
They were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I had a part to play in that, and I might not have been aware." And I was like, "Oh, that's so sweet."
That is really sweet.
Yeah.
Aw, I love it. Okay, so one more question for you on this, because I wonder what your answer is. Going back to oral sex, if a person is licking your anus and then they want to come up back to your vulva, what are your thoughts there?
I haven't encountered it.
Okay.
Haven't encountered it, so don't really have thoughts. Analingus isn't really my jam, so.
I think it's so in the last video that I posted on Sexplanations YouTube channel, it was the most upvoted question was how to eat ass. And I'm very curious how many people will say, okay, vulva, then ass, or ass, then dam, or ass, then wash mouth, then vulva.
I mean,
what the routines are.
my kind of rule is like, you can end ass, but you can't start ass, right? like you can't go from ass to something else because of the E. coli risk. That's such a mental block for me, right? Then I'm just like, oh, that's not, I don't care how much you wash or clean. That's a risk that I'm not willing to take, and it grosses me out. So for me, it's like, you can end ass, but you can't start ass. So
Or at least have a really clean ass if you're going to do that. When I was getting ready to talk to you, I did some research on what other things cause UTIs besides E. coli, and there is a huge list of behavioral things that contribute to really moving the E. coli from a fecal area to the meatus. And I would encourage people to look that up. Right?
can you
That's
give
how
me
we
just a
stay
few
curious.
examples of what you mean?
Yeah. So, like the urethral catheter is one of them, or dehydration is another one. I put those as multiple choice items. They're not causing.
But they can exacerbate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me see what else is here. I'm looking at prevention.com, and it has sex, constipation, uncontrolled diabetes, holding it, so meaning not urinating when you need to urinate, dehydration, birth control. It says if you switch your birth control, the resulting hormone shift could lead to a change in hormonal bacteria in your vagina, which could up the odds of a UTI. Feminine products, so dirty pads and tampons, and then kidney stones.
The constipation one, I'm trying to figure out what that connection is, but
You might be able to blame your poop or lack thereof for your UTI. Being constipated makes it difficult to empty your bladder all the way, which means trapped bacteria can have lots of time to grow and cause infections, which is the same thing with the not peeing when you have to, the holding it, because you're keeping the urine in your body that
which
could
is like
be
a
infected.
warm, dark haven for bacteria,
Yeah,
right? Just
yeah.
interesting.
Right?
I didn't know.
So what have you learned?
Lots of things I've learned. I just learned about the correlation between constipation and UTIs. Didn't know that before. Fascinating question about biosex, gay, male sex. Is that sentence right?
Sure.
Okay. And urination after UTIs. That was really interesting. I'm sure I learned other things. They're not coming to mind.
I'm curious about how people are having oral sex, analingus and cunnilingus. We're totally always learning. I think that's wonderful. Anything that you want to add?
One more trick.
Oh, okay.
Because this one, you always give me the doe eyes for, but I believe in this prevention method,
Okay.
which is when you wipe from front to back, if you are a biosex female, I believe that my labia are long enough that they could potentially move from my vulva and touch my perineum. So when I use the bathroom and I wipe from front to back, I also pull my vulva taut so that they stay in place. And I believe that's part of my prevention. I think that's part of why I haven't had a UTI.
So you're saying that your labia are so long that if you were to just wipe, you would pull them in toward your anus, and then they would get E. coli on them for later. So your tactic is that if you're down in that area, you're going to pull your labia so they're taut, so that when you wipe, you're not wiping your labia into your anus.
Not pulling labia, which sounds difficult, but like pulling upwards on my mons
Oh, gotcha.
so that it just stays in place. Yeah.
Good one. I'll add, just in case people didn't just get this as obvious, you also don't want to wipe front to back and then wipe front to back again and again and again, because you're just taking your back and bringing it to the front. So you're going to wipe front to back and then either get a new thing of toilet paper or wipe front to middle, front to back.
Let's just stay safe and say new toilet paper if you start at the front again.
New toilet paper.
Okay.
Or pee and shake.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
I was like, what are you talking about? Okay. Yeah.
Richelle, thank you so much for coming to talk with me. It was awesome having you here.
Thank you. That was really fun.
We know all about each other's urinary tract infections now.
And so does everyone else.
Woo woo! I also want to thank Cinema Studios for sound, Complexly for production, Count Boogie for the jingles, and all of you for listening. Next week, I sit down with Hank Green to talk about not masturbating. You can get updates on all of our episodes at patreon.com/Sexplanations podcast, buy our cool merch at dftba.com, suggest future co-hosts, and give feedback in the comments. And Cora Amparo, I'm still learning.